Welcome back to the shop. Today we're working on the coffee table build. We had a little bit of a setback. The glue up that I did previously warped pretty significantly, and we were trying to use the flattening jig to get that nice and flat. I left for about a week and a half. I came back, it warped again. So it's not going to be thick enough to use. So I went to my local hardwood supplier and found some great project wood for this. Kiln dried, no cracks. It's really, really great. I'm not going to get rid of the glue up that I did before. I think it's still, once it's dry, I think I'll be able to use it for something, cut it down for a cutting board or something like that. Maybe use it out at the cabin. But I'm going to lose too much thickness if I try to keep flattening it. Clearly there's something wrong if the wood's not dry, or where I'm keeping it down here, it's just the humidity's not right. Something's not working. I think the culprit is the center board within the glue up. It's cracking, it's warping. I just can't get it to work. So we're going to start over. And I'm excited about this because I get to show you the full glue up process, which I didn't get to do before. So I'm going to show you what's wrong with this glue up, and then we're going to get into how I do glue ups here in the shop. Here is the previous glue up. You can see, like I said, there's some cracking, there's some warping. This is the side I got flat previously, so it's sort of upside down. But if you take a straight edge or a straight board, this side was perfectly flat before, and now it's not. So like I said, I left for a couple weeks and came back. It's unfortunate. I put a lot of work into this. The flattening jig works great. There's only so much you can do with the wood that you have. I think that's a good reason to start with good quality wood that is dry. If you have the opportunity to dry it yourself, that's fine, but it just takes time. These are the other pieces that I had cut and prepared for the table, and they're thinner, much thinner. 1 inch, 3/4, and these are just under 2 inch for the legs. I might redo them depending on if the colors line up with the wood that I got versus these. But I checked them and they're still straight. So they were dry and they're still usable. So I think I'm going to plan on still using these. They're already pretty much where I need them to be. I have to put a little taper on the leg here, on those 4 legs. But I think I'm going to try to keep using them. I'm going to have enough wood to remake all of this stuff if I need to. But if I don't need to do that, then I will keep that wood for other projects. So it's unfortunate to see this glue up go to waste, but it's just for now. I mean, this is a beautiful glue up. It's about 30 inches by, I think, about 20. So it's great. I'm going to let it dry. We'll flatten it again whenever it's fully dry, maybe another year or so, 6 months, and then we'll get back into that. So let's look at the new wood that I got. All right, so here is the wood that I have. So I have some red oak 4/4. It's about 5.5 inches wide. I got 1 board of that. Looks like it's just under 4 board feet. And then I got an 8/4 white oak board that is 7 inches, and that's true 8/4. I think that was just over 12 board feet. This wood is great. I mean, it's not perfect. The place that I get the wood, I get it pretty affordably because there are things that they can't use for their projects. It's kind of like a co-op. So it's not perfect wood, but for the stuff that I'm doing, I like the little pieces of character and things. So I had them cut these down to 30 inches for me, and this is what was left over, this big piece here. So I shouldn't need to touch that. If I do touch that, it's probably going to be for the legs, if I need to redo the legs. But these 3 boards, if we put them together, first of all, they're straight, fairly straight. I mean, I have to join them, but much straighter than what I was working with before. We're at 21 wide and 30 inches long. And I'm going for, I think it's 28 by 14 or something like that. So this should work really, really well. And I think I'll be able to really kind of pick, especially with the width, what side I want to use for the best. Now, they're not perfectly flat on one side. They were run through a planer, but they're still a little bit rough, so I'm going to have to plane them down a little bit to get them flat. And we have some really interesting character. There's a couple knots here, and I'll have to decide if I want to use that as sort of the centerpiece, or if I want to put them on the bottom and just try to kind of get a nice top. So I'll play around with it here and try to look at it, and then we'll work on getting the glue up in order. These other boards, I had them cut for like the apron, 30 inches, two 30-inch boards, and then I could rip these down the middle to get the right width. But like I said, I think I'm good. I think I'm gonna keep using the boards that I have, and I think it'll look really, really good like that. So that is the plan. Let's work on getting these boards prepped. Now, what I'm thinking about glue ups, I'm really thinking about taking the time to pick the right side of the right board in the order of the board specifically. Now, when I'm looking at these, I have here on my notes that my target is 28 by 18. Doing a little bit of measuring here, we're at 21, but we have some pretty significant gaps here, so we're gonna have to cut these down anyway. You have a couple choices to make. You can leave the board in the middle full width and then cut the sides down, or you can cut all three boards to equal your width. Now, I think my plan, just for sort of ease of the project, because I'm on a little bit of a time crunch, I am just going to join these two joints here, glue it up, flatten it, and then cut it down. That's my plan. On the length, I'm looking for 28, and I'm at 30. So that's not enough to take into consideration the planer's bite. Generally, there's like 2 or 3 inches of reduction beyond the thickness that you're going for through the planer. I do want to run these through the planer, so I have to take that into consideration. So they're right at 2 inches now. The end tables that this table will match, I did run through the planer, so I know that it's noted as 2 inches, but it's probably more like 1 7/8 or something like that. It's a little bit less because you got to take into consideration the material you're taking off for flattening. A 2-inch thick tabletop is super heavy. Generally, you're gluing up panels of 3/4 or maybe 1 inch, and flattening it there again too. So really, it's the aesthetic that you're going for, and in this case, it's going to be a heavy table, but that's the request. So that's what I'm working on. Now, with these glue ups, there's a lot of preparation. It's mostly preparation. The work itself is not hard. It's general woodworking, but it's a lot of prep. Specifically, when you get into the actual glue up side, it happens very, very quickly. There are many things happening all at once. So we want to eliminate as many of those variables as possible in the prep phase, which is what we're doing now. So the first stage is really deciding the boards, the board order, the board size. So what I think I'm going to do first is I'm going to run these boards through the planer so I can get nice flat sides on one side, probably both sides, so I can get a good look, making sure that the thicknesses are all the same, and then picking my sides. From there, I'm going to join the joints so they're perfectly flat. And then I'm going to do wafers. So you can do dowels, you can do wafers. Anything to align the boards as closely as possible and prevent warping in the future is always a good idea. You don't have to. This wood is kiln dried, so it's probably not going to move. But you have to take into consideration, where this table is going to be. Is it going to be inside, outside? Where in the country you're at, specifically the humidity fluctuations, all that stuff affects wood. Like, it doesn't affect plastic or other materials like it does wood. Wood swells. So you'll notice, like, in the winter or the spring or the summer, when your doors close a little tighter, your wooden doors, that wood is constantly changing. So that's what's happening. Now with this, we want to eliminate as much of that as possible by putting those wafers in there and really giving it some structure outside of just the wood and the wood glue itself. So that's the process. Let's get these boards planed down. Let's see what we're working with, and then I'll make a decision on the board placements and the layout. This is a Craftsman 12-inch planer. The cutting blades are at the top, and it sort of feeds the material through by itself. So I've set the depth to just over 2 inches. What that's going to do is it's going to take off any high spots that are above 2 inches. And then what I'll do is, once I find that sweet spot, I'll start to just remove a little bit from the top of each board until I get it perfectly how I want it. Then I'll flip the boards over and do the same thing on the other side, and running all boards through at all depths. That way the thickness is the same across all boards. Now that the boards are flat on top, we got rid of all the resawing marks and everything, the planing from the sawmill. We have one perfectly flat side. So now we're going to flip the boards over and work on getting the other side perfectly flat. Now that the boards are flat on both sides, we're going to look at how we want to organize them. Now, when I was planing them, I left a couple spots here that were high or low in this case, because I think that when I cut this to final dimensions, that's going to be cut off anyway. And I'm looking at the best way to organize this might be to make sure that that's the case, that that's going to be removed. So I know that I want this on an outside, and it may end up being on the bottom. I like this board. I like the way this board looks. This might be the middle. And on this board, we have a big kind of elongated knot right here. So I'm going to try to cut that off too. So I'm thinking something like this as the organization of the boards. And if I take the tape and measure, I can see that 18 is right here, and if I make sure to cut right to the edge of that to 18, I can get most of this knot off. So that's probably going to be the case for this side. Now we want to make sure that what the other side looks like, and make sure that if this is going to be the top or if this is going to be the bottom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this pencil, and on the end here I'm just going to mark them in order of what I'm thinking, 1, 2, and 3. So now when we flip them over, I know that the underside of one will be on this side, so on and so forth. So this is the top, and I'm looking at this. I like these two boards. This knot I would rather not have. And then I see there's a knot here too. You can fill some of this stuff with epoxy and other things, but let's look a little bit more here. So that knot looks like it goes through to this side too. So it looks like I'm kind of stuck with it. Alternatively, I do have another board, what was left, that I could potentially swap this board out for. This knot here, also not ideal. I was planning to maybe cut off the majority of this knot. That doesn't really leave me a whole lot if I trim this down. So I'm going to pull this other board over and we'll take a look. So here's the cut of what was left of this board. And it does have some knots on the edges and things like that. There's a couple holes and knots here, so it's not a whole lot better. I think visually, the one thing that I'm really considering the most is making sure that my edges are knot free and as smooth as they can be. So if I have to do a little bit of filling here and there, I think that might be okay. As I flip this board over here again, the edge is cleaner, which is great. And if I do cut off a little bit of this, that's fine too. So I'm sort of looking at this one now as a potential to swap out. This really has to be at the bottom. So the question I'm left with now is, am I okay with this big split being here or not? If I look at this board, of the two sides, this side is probably better. I may be able to trim some of this off, but I will be left with a little knot here. If I come in from this side, looking at 30 inches, 30 inches is here, so this will be caught in that as well. This one will be there. This is just over 28. So that will probably be there too. There's a little knot on this side. Coming back over here, 28 is here, so this split will be included. So there's some decisions to make. You can see that, you know, when you're working with this type of wood, it is good. It's good quality wood, but you know, it has a lot of defects because it was cuts of other projects. So you have to make some compromises in some cases. So if I swap this board in just to see the width, what I'll be able to cut off and what I have to keep. Again, playing as this is the top. 18 inches, I can get this knot removed, and this knot removed. And I think that might make for a pretty good top. We still have a little bit here, but if I plane this board down, then that may disappear. So I think this is the move. I think we're going to do a swap. I'm going to cut this down to 30 inches, run it through to the same thickness as I have for these boards, and then we'll mock it up again to see if it's going to work. I was thinking for this to be the top, but after planing, this side is really looking good. So let's see how this aligns with the measurements. I think that a good portion of this can be removed. Yeah, so I can cut that fully off. This knot will be removed. This edge looks good. Once we get it trimmed down through the joiner, I think that'll get cleaned up. We will lose a little bit of this width when we close this gap right here. So, you know, again, it's never going to be perfect, but I think that, see, this is the part, right, where you're trying to figure out what's what. I can't use this on the top because of this knot here on the edge, but otherwise this would have been a really great piece of wood. So I think we'll flip it back over. We'll use this side. That's okay. I can clean these out and maybe do a little bit of a epoxy touch up, a little, you know, little super glue trick to kind of clean some of that up. So I think this is going to be my final choice. So let's renumber them again. 1, 2, and 3 in this orientation. I'll put arrows for the top so I know what the top is. Now, the next step in this process is making these joints flat. There's a couple different ways to get the joints ready for gluing, to get them lined up. The first is to use the table saw. The table saw can generally provide you with a nice straight edge to then run through the joiner, but you run the risk, without having a perfectly straight edge, to have that blade kind of wander a little bit. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start and finish with the joiner, taking it slow, taking, you know, 1/64 off each run to get it flat, holding it up against the fence so it's perfectly flat. We know this side is flat, so the bottom will then perform that perfect 90. That'll give us what we need to move on to the next step, adding in the wafers and then gluing it up. So let's get the joiner out. Now I have a little bit of history with this joiner. 3 weeks ago to the day, pretty much to the hour, I got my hand caught in the blade on this joiner. So this is really my first time joining since then. So I kind of tucked it away and have been working with other tools and projects, but we have to use it. So we're going to use this safely. We're going to use it slowly. We're going to use it how it was meant to be used. Every tool in the shop deserves respect, especially the joiner, especially an old joiner like this with no safety features, essentially, other than the guard. It's got a massive electric motor on it. It doesn't stop for anything, and I can attest to that. So let's get into it. I'm noticing that it's not cutting into 90. So I'm going to put a square up here and check. And I can see just like that on the fence that it's not anywhere near a 90. So we're going to make some adjustments and make sure it is cutting into 90. And we're going to start over. This angle adjustment has 3 set screws and they seem to be a little bit loose. So let's give this a try. That helps in one direction, but it looks like this needs tightened too. Okay. That looks pretty close. All right, I think the main issue that I was dealing with here is that I have these casters mounted to these, the legs of this stand, and these casters are down or up, and these casters are down, and it has the whole bed tilting a little bit to the left. And I think, I don't know, maybe I was just holding it wrong. It did need re-squared. that was not aligned, but once I started holding it against the fence, it seemed to work fine. So you saw the glue up before I jointed these boards, and now you can see how well they fit together. And these aren't pressed or anything with clamps yet, but you can see just how tight they fit together. Even if I just hold them with my fingers, there's sawdust on the table. So, but really, really, really nice. And, you know, there's a little bit of discrepancy in the thickness of the boards. That will all get sanded out. It's looking really good. I think the next step now will be to prepare it for glue. All right, we've done a lot so far, and we're getting really close to starting the glue up. So I'm gonna lay this out. I cleaned up the area a little bit. I see that this is 3, this is 2, this is 1. And we're just gonna do kind of a one last look, making sure this is the side we want. Everything is as close as it can be in length and width and thickness. It's all pretty close. There is some variation I can feel in the wood, but it's going to be sanded and flattened anyway. So I like this. I'm happy with this. We'll double check it again. So we're going for 28. I'm going to cut about 1 inch off each end lengthwise. Looking at 18 this way, it's 20 3/4. So there's a little bit we can cut off. A fair amount actually on each side to get it to where we want it. I'm going to put, I think, a 1/4 inch router or 1/4 inch round router around the whole thing. That's how the end tables are. So we'll do that to match. That may look really interesting here with this big knot. I'm excited for that. Again, we're going to cut that down, so I think that'll look great. A nice finished touch. So the next step in this process is to prep for glue. This all goes really quickly from here. So what I like to do is I like to use these wafers. So these little wood wafers sit in between the layers of wood. So we cut a groove in both boards, and they align because it's the same depth from the top, and we put 2 or 3 wafers between each board. That helps the boards from moving up and down against each other, and it helps with that swelling that I was talking about before that wood likes to do. So to do this, I have this tool here, and what this tool does is it has a small, it looks sort of like a circular saw bit. Let me unwind this and show you. A little circular saw bit, you can see it sort of pop out there. And what you do is you set the depth from the top, and then you set the depth, how far it pushes in. And as long as that's the same between all your wood, so the top of your glue up to the bottom, then all the tops and the bottoms will align. So that makes it really nice. You cut these little grooves for the wafer in both boards at the same spots. Then when you glue them and clamp them together, you know that they're pretty well aligned. So the rule of thumb is you'd like to have it about halfway between the top and the bottom of the board. So if I measure, these started as 2 inch or 4 or 8/4. Right now they are just over 1 3/4. So if we look at maybe 1 inch, just under 1 inch, that should give us just about half. Again, this doesn't need to be perfect, and also as long as it's the same between all the boards, it doesn't really matter what depth you're going to. You just don't want it too close to the top or to the bottom. So I can adjust on this tool. It's set to just over 1 inch. So let me look at bringing that down just a hair, just under 1 inch. about there. So we tighten that down. The angle is at 90, so that's good. Tighten that down. And then it also has a depth gauge. And I like to put that on, for me, I like manual. I like to be able to push it as deep as we can go. These wafers are, historically these wafers for me, it provides a little friction, some surface area when you're pushing them together. Makes it pretty challenging. So I like to cut a little deep and let the glue work. The glue will swell the wafer and really provide that surface area for the glue to stick to. They're also like balsa wood or something. Well, it says they're hardwood, but I don't know. I mean, they feel very light, they're very soft, they're very absorbent. So they swell once you get them wet with the glue. So that's how that process works. How you line them up perfectly is pretty simple. So we're kind of doing a little mock-up here. This being the top. The way you align them is, once you get them set like this, you can just take a pencil or chalk or crayon or whatever you'd like, and you just make a mark on both boards. So that point intersects both boards, and that gives me a point to connect the tool to push in and do the cutting. And we know that when we bring these back for the glue up, that those lines should align, because that's where the wafer is. So I think for this one, I think I'm just going to do 2. It's not super wide or long, and I think 2 is going to provide me enough support where I feel confident in the work of the wafer. So about this same distance from the end, it's about 5 inches. Doesn't need to be perfect. So that's where my wafers will be cut. Here's a close look of what I was just cutting. So this is where the wafers will fit. So it looks like it's just over half distance of the top. All good. And what happens is you drop these wafers down in as you're gluing, and you can tap them in a little bit, but really they should fit, and they will. So once you clamp them, then those get pressed together and they align the boards from shifting between each other. So it kind of gives them that one point to press against. If they're going to shift, that should hold them in place. So that's the idea. But they will be covered in glue down here, glue it on the wafer, and then we press it. Things are coming together quickly now. You can see I have a lot of clamps on the table. Anyone that does a lot of tables or glue ups, panels, things like that, tends to have sort of what you see here on the table. Now the base of the clamping for this glue up are these pipe clamps. These pipe clamps provide a lot of support and a lot of pressure to hold this glue up together. This isn't a very big panel, so we don't need every bit of force these clamps provide, but they're going to help us align everything and make sure it's pressed together and that glue gets a chance to hold. I have some other clamps here, some long clamps, and some of these clamps as well. So sometimes when you're doing glue ups, these are really nice for the ends of the boards to make sure they're aligned. So we have a lot of options here. These next few steps happen very quickly, and it's good to be prepared. So that's why we have everything out. So we'll do one more quick dry fit, and then we'll get the clamps ready and to the right lengths to start the process of applying glue down in the clamps, clamping, and setting. So these pipe clamps will be the base. These pipes are flat, and we know that. So when we're placing the boards onto the clamps, it's good to have something that we know is flat underneath to help support the boards and keep them flat during their drying process. So we'll put one pipe on this side and one on this side, and we'll start to fit the boards onto the pipes like this. I like to have these pipe clamps in line with where my supports, like in this case these biscuits, will be. So that's what my plan is here, is to line these up there. That way, whenever we go to apply pressure for the first time, that spot will be the force. Okay, next I have these long clamps. I'm gonna put one underneath, right about here. And then I'm going to put one on the top to match it, right about here. Lastly, I'm going to use these clamps on the ends. So I'm going to put one here, I'm going to put one here. I know this probably looks like overkill, and it probably is, but it's good to have even clamping pressure across the whole piece, especially something this thick. So this is the mock glue up. There's no glue in here yet. I'm just visualizing where each of these clamps is going to go. I've said a few times how quickly things go toward the end of these glue ups when you actually apply the glue, and that's really because the wood glue starts to dry quickly. This wood is dry, so it soaks the glue up fast. You only have about 10 minutes before that glue starts to get pretty tacky, and we need to make sure that when we drive these wafers in, the glue is still wet. That's very important. It becomes really challenging whenever you start to press these boards together and the wafers are already set in the glue that you've used in those pockets. It's important to visualize where these clamps are going to go, so when the glue is on, you know exactly what you're doing. How this goes is I will put the boards up like this. I know that these joints will face each other, and then once this joint is on top of here, then I know that this joint faces this joint, so I'll put that one up. We have our glue using Titebond 3 and a mallet in case we need some persuasion. Sometimes I'll wear gloves. I don't think I'm going to today. I'm pretty confident we'll be able to get this done. I've pressed the wafers in my vise. That helps shrink them down a little bit. Like I said, they're really absorbent, so that helps get them in. So right before we start, I'll pull those out and then we'll get going. All right, let's go. While I'm doing this, I know that what I'm going to need to do is get glue on pretty much every possible square inch here of this wood. I'm not going super heavy and thick, but I know I need to provide some coverage here. So I'm using my finger to spread the glue around and make sure that I get it on the entire surface of this 2-inch board. I know I'm a little bit dry here. I'm going to add a little bit more into these wafers. So I'm going to scrape some of the extra out, pop them in the wafer like this. Just like that. On the corners, making sure everything's good. Pull these wafers out. I'm going to drop 2 in here just like this. Then I'm going to glue the next one just like this and do the same thing. It's like I got a little bit more on this one. And with gluing wood, you generally want to glue both sides. So I'm putting some of that extra glue down in. I may pull a little bit of that over here because I know there's some drier spots. I'm not putting it on the third board because It's going to be a little bit before we can get to that one. So this joint specifically is now glued. These wafers will mate with those holes. So we will go just like this. And on my side, what you can't see is I'm aligning these lines that we drew on before. Here's a little persuasion, just like that. Perfect. Aligning it a little bit this way. That is perfect. So there's still a little bit of a gap on your side. You can see that. I know it's there. That will get pinched together whenever we do the clamping. So now we're working on the final joint, the second joint on this table. Little liberal with the glue, that's all right. Bringing this side over. Getting glue everywhere. That's part of it. All right, now we'll spread this one around. This is usually where I get glue on my sleeves. Just like I did just there. All right. Getting glue down in those wafer holes. Put the wafers up here. Just like that. Aligning the holes here on this side. That looks really good. Little persuasion. All right, I'm just noticing a little bit of misalignment on the depth. Not exactly sure what happened, but that's all right. We can sand that out. All right, so there's the quick panel. So now it's time to clamp. So these clamps are aligned with the lines. Pushing those clamps forward. Same here. Snap this one. We add the tops. And we start to clamp. So we'll start with these big ones. Applying even pressure. We're watching the joints close. Yes, those joints are closed. We're checking that it's not bowing. And it looks pretty good. I'm going to loosen this side, flatten that down. That's better. Double check this side. That side is good. Sometimes when you clamp the bottom, it could bow up a little bit. So as I'm tightening these ones, I'm pressing down. And the clamp will also provide some support as well. Okay. Last. Okay. Over tightening. I know it's a thing. I like to keep things tight. Over tightening can cause some bowing as well. I'm going to give this a quick look from this side. It looks pretty good. There is some unique misalignment happening with this middle board. So that's going to be some work for us a little bit later. I may be able to work with that a little bit here with these clamps. This side is worse. The boards just aren't perfectly aligned, so we can force them down a little bit, and that does seem to be working. So we work the end, but I can still see that there's a lip, pretty good lip there. I'll add one here as well. I'm putting this clamp right between the two joints. Try to force them to flatten. This side's okay. This one could use clamp. So we'll add that here. Again, that's the same bad joint as there. Well, maybe not bad. Hopefully not bad. It's interesting. It's not too awful bad, but it is there. So maybe the boards had some wave in them. Nevertheless, we can get it there with the belt sander. It's no problem. Okay. That happened quick, but that's the glue up. It's not that complicated, but you just have to work quick. But all in all, you could add 2 or 3 more boards to this, right, to make a long glue up. The process is the same. So you work one joint at a time, making sure everything is aligned, adding the next and the next and the next. More than 3 boards up becomes a challenge. So you're sort of adding them this way, laying the boards together and clamping them. I'm happy with how this one went. I know there's some work to do, but that's the process of doing glue up panels. I'll show you around this glue up a little bit. So this was my perspective from this side. And you can see I was talking about the boards not perfectly aligning. You kind of see a little bit of an edge. I mean, not really. You can't, but I could feel it. Here's a little bit of a look. I just have it up there a little bit. You can see that edge, this edge here. You can see that's a little pronounced. I mean, it's not, it may be, 16th. But so we'll just have to flatten that with the belt sander. But you can see we're getting good glue coming through the whole way. Clamps are working, so good. That's it for the glue up. So on the next one, we'll look at taking the clamps off, getting it cut down, and then moving on to next steps like finishing the top, building the base, getting it ready to go.